So
We're talking about practices that predate Muhammad.
so then, what religious authorities do submitters accept? Right.
Right. So we do have a messenger
Other than
that
him,
lived.
do you have like any
Well,
real scholars? Yeah.
we have the Quran.
And Quranists have the Quran.
Well, we also have a messenger.
Yeah. And
But what do the Quranists have?
I mean, your messenger's dead.
Yeah, but his teachings are alive.
Uh, yeah.
I mean, we have plenty of information to go by. So it's not conjecture. It's not guesswork. We don't need to play detective here. It's all pretty straightforward, pretty laid out for us.
I mean, so what you're saying is, I mean, I'm really not understanding your whole critique here. Like, it just sounds like,
It's
uh,
okay. It's a very deep and heavy subject. Um, Basically, we use the Quran to purify the existing religion. Quranism attempts to build an entire religion from nothing. Do you see the distinction there?
so Quranists also see the Quran as purifying existing religion. Like,
They don't, though. That's the problem. Because when you ask them, there's 14 variations of the Quran. Which one is the right one? They don't have an answer.
do you mean ones with different qira'at?
Not just qira'at. I'm talking about the what is it? Ahruf, the actual
Uh-huh.
textual differences. Quranists don't address that, and that's how the Sunnis get them. Because when the Sunnis box them in on that, then they're stuck. They're checkmate. They lose. But the
Uh-huh.
submitters have a way to get out of that because we believe in a mathematical code designed by God that serves as a tool to identify the correct edition of the Quran. And we have it and we can
So,
use it and we know it.
can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so we
I,
have a
I know what you're talking
mathematical.
about, but Kennedy doesn't. Probably other people here don't.
Yeah, yeah. So we kind of talked about this last time. We have a mathematical system based on the number 19 in the Quran. It verifies every letter, chapter, word, and verse of the text. We have
Yeah. So,
a
uh,
comprehensive system. It's a very advanced antivirus mechanism.
so there are other versions of the Quran, right, that you all deny, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, right. So the closest edition. So we learn from the Quran there's a master tablet. We take the master tablet and we check it. Actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. There's one master tablet, meaning there's one edition of the Quran that is correct. All the other ones are not accurate.
when
We
was this
have
version of the Quran made?
it was standardized in Egypt, I think about 1926.
Mhm. And why do you think that wasn't really used before?
I mean, it was always used, but now it's just like 98%, 97%
Mhm.
of
But
Muslims use it.
mhm. And so I mean, I'm just interested. Like, so the Quran, right? Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, I mean, the qira'at is a recitation, but that's not even the main issue. The ahruf is the issue. We're examining the written form of the text. We believe that God's word is presented to us in written form.
Mhm.
So now we have a system to identify the correct edition of the written form.
Mhm.
So we use this system and we identify it as the Hafs edition.
So, uh, and how would you word this? So, uh, I mean, as far as I'm aware, Hoff, this Hoff, for those who don't know, he was a big scholar, chronic scholar back in the day, and and he had compiled this version of the Quran, tried to standardize it, right? And and from my understanding, that this was, uh, I mean, his version of the Kirat and the I don't know how you pronounce it exactly. I'm not very good with Arabic
Yeah,
language.
Ahruf. Yeah, Ahruf.
Yeah,
That's right.
he had like compiled this, right? It wasn't already around really. These were somewhat fragmented, right? And he had tried to bring them together. Is that
I
correct?
mean, basically, he had a recitation style, and it was basically put down into writing, and that's what we have.
So, and you thinking, I mean, I'm just confused. Why would his version that seemed to only really become standardized in 1926? I mean, we could get into the mathematics of the 19 code thing.
I mean, that's basically what it is. That's what it comes down to. Either it works or it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, so code 19, first and foremost, covers the 29 chapters. Then it covers the number of verses. Then it covers the number of chapters. Then it covers specific words. Then it covers specific letters within words. Then it covers a variation of phrases. Then it covers verse numbers. Then it covers chapter numbers. And it goes on and on and on. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
elaborate system. And exclusively, it's pointing to one edition of the Quran. It's not a coincidence. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is.
So it seems like, right, that sometimes in mathematics, whenever you go searching for things, right, that patterns like this seem to just show up. It's a fact of how mathematics work. And I've looked into the 19 code a lot, and I've read some stuff about it. And um, from some of the mathematicians I've read about it and stuff like that, it always, I don't know, it always came off to me like this was more of a product of the search, right? Like this was a pattern that you could, a type of
So
mathematical pattern that you could find in any book, in the same way that you might, that they've done
yeah,
this with the Bible too, to an extent, right?
they
Where they were able
haven't.
to find a
They
pattern in the
haven't.
Bible,
No, you're talking about the Bible code. That is
or the Torah
when
code, I think it was.
the Torah code is a word search sequencing. It has nothing to do with mathematical composition. And just to
What do you mean by
touch
that?
brief, though, they basically just put the letters of the Torah or the Bible in a word search format, and then they just circle words that form either going horizontally or diagonally.
Whenever I read it, it seemed like there was a lot of math involved with that.
It really isn't, but this is very simple. I mean, this is a very easy equation. There's 29 chapters in the Quran with initials. What's the probability of the initials in these chapters being multiples of 19? It's a very simple equation.
It's pretty low, right? But
No, it's not just pretty low. When you get in mathematics, at some point you pretty much just say that's not happening. It's not a random chance. And on top of that, the number 19 is mentioned. So again, we're not picking the variables. The number 19 is the only undefined number in the Quran, and the
so,
initials are, and the initial what's that?
how many chapters are there in the Quran again?
114.
And why are these first? How many did you say? 23.
There's 29 initial chapters.
Yeah. So, and there's also a difference in how these chapters are initialed depending on what type of the Quran you use. But uh, but my understanding is that again, like these types of patterns, they might look very, very, very rare. But whenever you look in any big data set like the
So show
Quran is,
me. Okay, so show me a similar system because I did this in college. I literally took Moby Dick and I used the exact same formula and I got nothing. So if you have something else to show me, by all
well,
means,
that's the
please.
thing. I mean, you can that. Okay,
Just
let's take a
demonstrate
step
it
back.
to me. I mean, show me.
So,
Show me
one
another
second.
book with a similar system.
So, uh, you okay? Let me figure out how to word this before I say it because I have issues wording things sometimes. Um, so what I'm saying is that sometimes these things arise. It's not always, but sometimes they do,
So,
especially in truly huge data sets like the Quran, right?
okay, but
And
it's not.
wait a second.
All right,
And
go ahead.
and even though you might not be able to apply the 19 code to Moby Dick, right, you might be able to find some other mathematical thing, right? And just and Rashad Khalifa, he had gone into these huge computers and he'd done a lot of work to find a code like this and all this different
I
stuff.
mean, literally, the computer he had was more primitive than
Mm-hmm.
our cell phones
An
were
iPhone,
10
yeah,
years
yeah.
ago. No, not forget about iPhone. I'm talking about like even the basic phones from like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I understand. But he had came in with computers and he looked for something like this. And even though 19 might not apply to Moby Dick, another thing might, right? We haven't gone
So
around
let's
looking
see
for it.
it. All right. No, I mean, I'm sure you really believe that no one's tried to look. This code has been around for 50 years. You really believe in the last 50 years, no one has tried to find a similar phenomenon in over, what, 100 million books available?
I mean, the point is that so I'm gonna be very blunt here.
It
I have a math
doesn't
disability. This is
exist.
math theory, not actual math, right? Like, uh,
It doesn't
so
exist, though. Like, you're making a claim for something that doesn't exist. What you're proposing is a theory. It doesn't exist. If you can demonstrate it, I love to
um,
see it. I have something, hard evidence I can show you.
so
It's tangible, it's physical. I can demonstrate it to you. You are proposing a theory, something else exists when you have no evidence that it does. You're just
yeah, I mean,
theorizing
I
that
can
it
go
does.
back and try to find some of these mathematical papers. I mean, it's
Please do.
again,
Please
I'm not
do.
I'm not a big math guy. This is just my understanding of math theory and the stuff that I've
No, no,
read,
no.
right?
But right, but
Um,
but but you're not understanding a basic concept of this. The likelihood of any number being a multiple of 19 is 5%.
mhm,
When you want two multiples, it becomes less than 1%. When you want
mhm.
three multiples, it becomes a thousandth of a percent. When you want five multiples, it only increases manifold. You suddenly exponentially get so low that there's nothing there for you to argue.
But whenever you have such a large data set as the Quran, right? Like I said before, these things. If I give you I can probably give you like 10 million random numbers. This is random. I know that there probably isn't even 10 million letters in the Quran, right? Um, but if I give you 10 million letters, and I or not letters, 10 million numbers, random numbers, right? You could probably find a set of data in those numbers that looks like super, super rare, but it's actually not. It's just a product of there being
No,
10 million numbers and you being
no.
able to find these patterns, right?
Do you know what this is like? This is like walking in the ocean and finding an iPhone and saying, well, this is caused by erosion.
What?
That's what this is similar to.
How?
Because the level of complexity, the mathematical composition at hand is far not just it's not just cool and deliberate, it's beyond human abilities.
Okay. So I'm not claiming that there's any human intervention here to make there be a code of 19 in the Quran, right? I'm saying that
You're saying it's an illusion, is what you're saying.
in a way, yeah,
So I
in a way.
and okay, so now you need to learn how to distinguish if a deliberate design in a mathematical structure exists, right? So if I write a book based on the number 10, and I tell you it's based on the number of 10, and it has 10 chapters, and each chapter has 10 pages, and each page has 10 paragraphs,
Hmm.
would it be reasonable for you to assume that this is a random coincidence?
Uh,
I'm telling you
hold on.
that I structured it this way, and it actually is structured that way. You're saying that this is
So
just can happen by chance? That's just not
let
very
me say what you said
logical.
again. I'm sorry.
I
Say it
said if
again.
I tell you I'm writing a book mathematically structured based on the number 10,
Hmm.
okay? And
Yeah,
then you
I
open the
understand.
book and you see that it has 10 chapters, and you see each
Uh,
chapter has 10 pages, and you see each page has 10 paragraphs. I'm asking, is it reasonable for you at that point to assume that this is just a coincidence?
um, if you were looking at a huge, huge, like, I mean,
Okay,
it would
forget
be
about
complicated,
okay.
but I
All right,
probably not.
let me
Yeah,
make
I'd
it
agree with you.
easier.
Probably not.
Okay, let's make it huge. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're not happy with 10, let's make it 100.
If it
If you,
was on
if you want to make
each
it
one 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, yeah. But go ahead. What are you saying?
Right. So if you're not happy with 10 chapters, let's make it 100 chapters.
Sure. Keep going.
Okay. So
What were
then,
you saying? Just I'm giving you
right.
this
So I'm
point. Keep
saying,
going.
yeah, okay. So then what I'm saying is you would not reasonably conclude that this is a coincidence, especially since I told you. Now we're reading the text of the Quran. The number 19 is mentioned. We're not testing random numbers to see what works. The number 19
Hmm.
is already in the Quran.
Hmm.
And then the initials are already there. They're placed for us. So we have very limited variables and wiggle room. So now we start counting these initials, and they just happen to occur in their chapters and multiples of 19. All right. Okay. What do they call the first revelation? Oh, first revelation, it's 19 words. What is that? 76 letters, 19 times 4. Well, what about the chapter? Well, it's 19 verses. Well, how
Hmm.
about the first statement in every chapter? Oh, it's 19 letters. Well, what about the last revelation? Oh, it's 19 words. Do you
Hmm.
not, I mean, do you see that it starts getting silly to say, well, this just happened to be a random chance. This is an illusion. It's just an
Hmm.
illusion. At some point, you have to be able to distinguish between an illusion and a deliberate design. And if you're
So
struggling with that, maybe you can go study about it.
I have run into this, and again, like I had said,
No, but it's not about this. The issue is not about you seeing a pattern here. The issue is you being able to distinguish the difference between uh, being able to distinguish how you can determine something is random chance and something is deliberate design. If you can't distinguish that, then there's no point of how much you see in it,
mhm,
right? But there has to be a way to determine, right? You can't just say
mhm.
there's no way to determine if something is deliberate or not.
So
That's not an answer.
uh, well, that's difficult because sometimes, like I said, whenever you have these huge things, it does get kind of difficult. Whenever you look at these
It
things, and you
doesn't,
can
though.
find a
It
pattern so
really
quick,
doesn't.
right?
But
But
it really doesn't. You keep using the word huge, but I'm telling you, let's give you 1,000 chapters. It
so
doesn't
I
matter.
understand what you're
No, no,
saying,
no.
okay?
But
But
look,
here's my thing,
being,
right? I
but
don't want to come
here,
in and make big statements about things that I haven't
no,
looked
no,
into
no.
this in a
But
long time.
listen to
But
me. Look, the data size is irrelevant in determining whether there is a deliberate structure. You're confusing two separate issues. Deliberate design has nothing to do with how large it is. A deliberate design can exist if it's a large body of information. It can exist if it's a small body of data. The
mhm.
ability to distinguish whether a design exists or not is independent of the sample size or the size of the data set.
So uh, all right. So let me find a way to word this. So uh, some with poetry, right? Whenever we're talking about the first parts of these verses, right, and how every time it hits at 19 letters in these initial verses specifically, not of initial surahs, and this can get complicated because, well, I'm pretty sure in different versions of the Quran it's 19, but with the thing with Hafs, I understand you think that's the only real version, right? But whenever you're dealing with poetry, sometimes you're kind of shrinking the chances of this being like a, a number that's very different from 19, right? And
Uh, okay, so
so
show me another piece of poetry that has the system you're
wait a second.
describing.
Just so I'm
Yeah.
saying that it might make sense poetically, right, to have a similar number of letters at the start of every verse, right? We're just talking about poetry here, right? Uh, Ken here is a uh, she does creative writing. She'd probably know about this. That it tends to be, whenever you're doing poetry, you might end up with similar numbers of letters at, say, in the first stanza, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay. So then now you're arguing for deliberate design. So now you're
I'm not
conceding.
arguing. I'm in a way arguing for deliberate design. In a backwards way. I'm not saying
Okay,
intentionally
so
the number 19 was injected here. I'm saying that from poetry and the way poetry is organized, and the Quran in a way it's very poetic, right? It's a
yeah,
very
but
poetic
what
book.
but it's not. But we're not just analyzing the literary aspect of the Quran. The number of verses has nothing to do with poetry factor.
I'm saying You said the number of letters at the start of
The,
each one of these things, right?
yeah, it's not just it's the number of verses, the number of
Mm-hmm.
chapters, the number of these initials within their chapters. This has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with poetic symmetry
How would that have nothing to do with poetic symmetry, especially the number of verses? Like,
because the number of verses in the Quran is 6,346. How
uh
does
huh.
the number 6,346 fit into any poetic symmetry? It doesn't.
I think I'm not sure if you're missing my point. Or, so, can you specify the thing with the verses that is especially unique?
Well, I'm just telling you. You're saying you're talking about poetic symmetry when it relates to literary aspects of the text. Even if you're going to argue that, first of all, that's a flawed argument because
How?
that makes no sense. Because that's like the first revelation is 19 words, has nothing to do with poetry. It's 19 words is a fact. The first revelation is
Mm-hmm.
19 words and 76 letters. And the ability for someone to do that is pretty much impossible because you realize that when you control words, letters, phrases, and uh, terms, you're diminishing literary quality. If I gave you a
What?
control system, that's right. If I give you a control
With poems,
system,
it's entirely different, right? Poems are intentionally very controlled, right? You
no,
have to have
no,
these rhyme. You
no,
have to have the letters make sense, right? They have
no,
to work together.
no, 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 no. The level of control in poetry is child's play compared to what I'm describing to you.
How?
For
You're
because
this is you
because
adding numerical
poetry.
values to these
No, no,
verses,
no,
right?
no.
And
I'm not adding numerical values. The number of words is not a
I
numerical
understand. I
value.
worded it wrong. I get that. Okay. Uh, what I'm telling you is that these whenever like to have the same number of letters in this first revelation as some number of verses would make sense, right? To have a similar number of verses in each one of these, right, would make sense, kind of, right? Because it fits, it works together, and sometimes, especially in poems, whenever you're talking about the number of letters, whenever you're talking about how they're sequenced, right, you're going to find patterns because that's inherently how poetry works,
So
especially in
show
Arabic.
me.
It,
I have very basic patterns. For example, the last letter rhyming. This has nothing to do with controlling the total letter count, total word count, and phrase count for the entire text. You're confounding issues
so
with what
it,
you're
it
saying.
it might okay.
The thing
So
is, though, is like you can do that
yeah,
with poetry.
I'll let Ken speak on this because she knows more.
Well, like some of the stuff that I'm writing, like, is so controlled to the point of like length of word count or like word letters and like the arrangement in
So,
which how long words are and all that stuff.
so do you control for specific letters?
I
And
wouldn't say
to what
letters.
extent do you? Yeah.
I think that you'd have to
Combinations
be
of
like,
letters.
Because when you
yeah.
start controlling for letters, you can try to write a poem with controls on letters. You're going to start realizing very quickly how difficult it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
When you control for letters and then you simultaneously control for words, specific words, and then you simultaneously control for total word count, total letter count, etc., etc. Every time you're adding a layer of control, you're increasing the difficulty manifold to the
Mm-hmm.
point that then you get to a point where when you want to have a coherent sentence, it becomes pretty much impossible.
So I think you're kind of missing the point here, right? Whenever you're controlling for like letters, right? Or it might look like you're controlling for letters. I'm sorry, I was just running around and dealing with dogs. But whenever you're actually like just trying to make similar sounds at the end of your lines, right? Uh, because ah, right, if you're trying to make an ah sound, you're gonna have an a, right? And you might have an h in there. So it might look like you're controlling for a's when you're just controlling for ahs, right? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, we're just talking over each other. You're addressing a separate, an unrelated point. I'm telling you, word count, specific word usage, letter count, verse count. These are all controlled, interlocking systems. So it's not. We're talking about the Quran written over 23 years, and we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about an order that is placed in is not even the order that it was revealed in. So this theory has no application to anything we're describing right now.
Uh, I mean, I don't understand how this has like this is what I understand that there's a greater point here, right, about these things being controlled, but on a
All right, so let me
literary
show
scale,
you.
right?
Let me show you because it's not just limited to one chapter; it's across chapters. So we're
Mhm.
talking about, in this case, it would be across. In your example, it would be across poems. So look here.
I
So I
mean,
just
would
put it for you.
you do?
I
You,
put
I
it
mean,
in. I put it in initial counts.
so you know what like Greek epics were, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Sure, sure,
So these were poems that were like bigger than most books written today.
right. Do they have anything remotely similar to the mathematical composition of the Quran?
My point is that it might appear like you could probably find mathematical things in that, right? And it gets
I'm
easier to
lit.
with poems.
I'm
In the same way,
literally.
you might
No.
find a mathematical pattern in Moby Dick, but you're going to be way more likely to
And what
find a
is this?
pattern in a poem because it's very controlled, right?
But hold on a second. What does this have to do with verse numbers?
Um, well, that's a whole different thing. That's again, we're just talking about the literary side here. Like if you uh, the verse numbers, I haven't looked very much into that. I don't know the very specifics on this. Like the
I'm
whole
just
19th
telling
thing.
you, like when you get to verse numbers, it has nothing to do with the literary aspect.
So can you elaborate on the verse numbers?
Yeah, a very basic example, chapter 1. It's a chapter that we recite in our prayer and how we establish direct connection with God. And we literally just write the chapter number and then the number of the verses. So it's just 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a multiple of 19. This has nothing to do with the literary uh, uh, avenue. It has nothing to do with the words. It has nothing to do with the letters. We're purely looking at uh, uh, the assigned verse numbers.
Hmm. So you're saying that some of the or was it? If I'm trying to remember, was it all the initial chapters? The number of verses are a multiple of 19, or is it some number of them?
The opening chapter, the first chapter called the Key, has an elaborate system in regard to verse numbers and its current composition to verify its structure.
Hmm. So okay, and and
So
the
let me give you an example. Just let's get a taste of this. Okay.
okay.
When you recite this chapter 1, it's 7 verses. Your lips touch 19 times. You can say, okay, that was kind of cool. It touches
Hmm.
19 times, right? But it's not just the fact that your lips touch 19 times. The value of the letters that they touch is also a multiple of 19.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah.
The value of what they touch is 19. What does that mean?
Yeah. So every letter in the Arabic alphabet, hold on. Um, all right, let me pull it up for you. Are you familiar with gematria?
No. What does that mean?
It's the system of numerical value assigned to letters of the alphabet.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, I understand.
So we're saying based on this system, if we check the letters that our lips touch the 19 times of chapter 1, which is the only chapter we recite in our prayer,
Hmm.
the value is a multiple of 19.
So, what values are you assigning to these letters, and where do you
I
get
just
that
put
from?
it in VC1 chat. This is a universally accepted value system that existed prior to the writing of the Quran for thousands of years.
Hmm.
This is also it's the Hebrew and Aramaic variants.
So, the value of the letters when your lips touch equals 19.
Equals 608, a multiple of 19. Your lips touch 19 times. That's correct. The value of the letters is 608. 19 times 32.
Okay. So,
So it's controlled. This is a double control right now. And this isn't even talking about the fact that the first verse is 19 letters. Each of the words in the first verse occur in multiples of 19 in the whole text, and a whole bunch of other data. We're just taking two very basic data points.
mhm.
Hmm.
So hold on, let me try to process what you're saying here.
I'm just telling you, like you like what you're saying, like you apply a very basic constraint of like what we would see in a typical poem. I'm telling you, this blows it out of the water. This is like that on steroids times 1,000. Like just to demonstrate just how crazy this is, all while being the standard of the Arabic language, the highest quality of literary excellence. This is not a minor issue.
Mhm. So, uh, so what you're saying, I mean, to me, this I'd have to look into the specifics here, like just on my own
Yeah, because
time.
you keep
But
the problem is you keep switching between, oh, it's an illusion, oh, it's actually just the deliberate design of poetry and it's easy done. It's like you have to first
well,
establish
this is different from the
which way
deliberate
you want
design
to.
of poetry, right? This is a different point. This is
Right. This is the whole. I'm just telling you, this is the whole other beast. It just that's why I keep saying there's nothing like this on Earth. So you talk about poems and epics and books and random literature. There is nothing. And the idea is, look, we live on this planet. We invent things, right?
mhm.
Nobody can. Nobody can do you. Nobody can have their first invention be the iPhone. We start from electricity, then we get to telephones, then we get to screens, television, and we start building towards the ultimate invention, which is the iPhone. Similarly, we don't just
So
jump onto the moon. It's the process, right? First, the Wright brothers teach everyone how to build a plane. Then they build a plane. The plane gets stronger. It gets more strength. It gets the ability to go higher, longer distances. We build rockets, right? It's a gradual process. So this is for everything in all of humanity. This has been the process. And to argue that this one issue, this one set of data in regard to the Quran is an exception to the entire state of affairs for all of humanity is an illogical position to have.
mhm. So with some parts of this, right? Again, like I said, I don't know the very specifics of the first surah and all this different stuff. Like I said, I'd have to look into it, uh, and that's all I can really
That's
say
what I'm
because
saying. Like I can
I'd
get.
have to look into
That's what I'm saying because every other piece of work has some limitations to the extent of its complexity. Here,
it.
anything that I give you, you can say, "All right, well, that's cool." And what else? And then I can just keep throwing more at you. It's different, right? So if Ken writes a poem, right? It's like, okay, what are your constraints? Okay, my
Mm-hmm.
constraints are the last letter rhymes. I don't use this particular letter, and I have like two more, let's say, controls. It's not the case for what I'm telling you. Every time you think that looks impressive, I can just drop another constraint on you. I drop another layer of complexity on you, and it's limitless.
Mm-hmm.
So then at some
But
point you have to say, all right, so then this is not something that you could just come up with.
but like I said before, so there's there's multiple layers to what I'm saying too, right? One is that whenever it comes to letters and these things occurring similar amounts of times and verses occurring similar amounts of times, this that might just be. I'm not telling you that that's why they're multiples of 19, but I'm telling you that whenever I'm saying that whenever you have big data sets and you sometimes find these patterns, it might make it more likely
But,
that you'd find a data
but
set like that
no,
in a poem, or
no,
I'll just say it would,
no,
right?
you're wrong again. You know why? Because you're assuming that a big data set means more opportunities to find patterns. but it's wrong because we're not looking at just one aspect of the data set. We're looking at the entire data set. So in order to have a coherent, consistent mathematical composition that encompasses the whole data set, the sample size is irrelevant because it's not like we have a bigger sample size, so then we're just focusing on 1% of the sample size to get desired results. We're still encompassing the entire sample size. So again, the size is irrelevant. Having a larger, if it was 200 chapters versus
So
114 chapters, it
if
wouldn't increase
I
the likelihood. The system either exists or it
definitely
doesn't.
right, if
No,
I
no,
gave you um 500 random numbers, it would be a lot less like you could find likely a you could find a pattern in 500 random numbers than you could find a pattern in like 2 million random numbers. You'd almost certainly find a pattern that actually looks pretty convincing in 2 million numbers, right? Maybe not
so
as
show
convincing
me,
as this, right? But
demonstrate it, demonstrate
I
it.
mean, what do you want me
You're,
to like I said, I could sit here and
can
I could make a 2 million random number generator, have that run on my computer for like a day, and then go in and find this out, or you can just like it seems like almost common sense that you'd find patterns in 2 million random
Yeah,
numbers, right?
yeah, but common sense does not necessarily mean facts, and unless you can
What?
demonstrate it, it's just a theory. So you're more than welcome to test your
So
theory.
you're
I'm
saying if
telling you
I
ahead of
gave
time, it's
you
gonna
two
fail.
million random numbers and we put it through a system, right? You don't think it
Yeah,
would find a convincing pattern?
no, because because we have to acknowledge the distinction between deliberate design and random chance.
I,
It sounds like you have the inability to do such a distinction, and that's a problem because that's the first requirement. You have to have the rational ability to distinguish between random chance and deliberate design. So
so
if you go to a beach and there's a lot of sand and you come across a sand castle, it has windows, it has doors, it has a patio, it has a porch, it has a bench. Are you going to
but
assume that
okay, look,
random chance this is erosion or like
if
the
you
random tidal waves created this? Like you're not able to distinguish this, then I'm sorry. You're not applying basic
what
elements of
I
logic.
look, if you're denying that if I gave you 2 million numbers and you put it through a system, you wouldn't find some type of pattern. You don't think that would have any type of
A
convincing pattern.
deliberate
Okay.
design. Yes, yes, yes. Show me. What? Give me an example of what it would look like. Go
Hey,
ahead.
Navitva. 1 second, guys. I sent a link in the chat. You can calculate random number sets. Click on the link in the VC1 chat and then generate 2000 numbers. You can go on the website, then you type 2000 numbers. You make min 1 and max you make 10, you make 9. And then you click on calculate. Then he gives you a list of 2000 numbers. And now you can look for a pattern.
Yeah, here you go. Use his website and go to here. Make it 2,000 numbers. Calculate it. You get a random number. Look for a deliberate pattern.
Hold on.
And actually, I think it searches for you.
Give
Hold
me one
on.
second. I have to find this thing. Cannot give more numbers in 1 second.
And you have to allow, and there's a checklist that says allow repeats. You have to make allow repeats yes.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
All right. So let's
So I
go
have
here.
10,000 numbers right now.
All right.
Uh, I mean, I'm gonna have to find. I have a cousin that's really good with coding. I could probably get him to do something like this. He'd find this interesting. Um,
Do it.
yeah, I'll generate 10,000
Code you
random
get.
numbers, and I'll try to
Code you
find
get.
a.
We examine
The
the
thing is that with only
probability.
10,000, you're probably not gonna find a very interesting pattern, but you're gonna
Okay,
probably
make
find
it
some.
10 million. Make it 10 million. I don't care.
I would have to run that on like a supercomputer. I'm sorry to say, man, but my computer's only got
You
24
it's
gigabytes
not
of
as
RAM.
no, it's not as it's you don't need a supercomputer, dude. This
What?
guy, Dr. Rashad Khalifa, did 12,000 digit numbers.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I'm just not interested in like spending like multiple days with my computer. You
Okay,
know,
but this is your theory. It's not my theory. It's
this
your
isn't my
theory.
theory. This is kind of like very. common sense that if there was millions and millions of numbers, you would find some pattern in it. Like in the same way that if you put, I forgot what the thought experiment is if you put like some number of monkeys in a room, they'd eventually write Shakespeare if you gave them typewriters, right? If you had an
It's
infinite amount of
actually
time,
not true. It's actually
that's
not
bullshit.
true, and we don't have an infinite amount of time here. We had one attempt, and it was successful.
I understand that you don't literally have an infinite amount of time. Okay, and I understand you don't literally have an infinite amount of letters for this. I'm saying that in the same way that eventually they would write Shakespeare, which would be a lot more complicated than the 19 code,
Do
right?
you know how? Do you know
Um,
how long it took them to get one line of Shakespeare? I think it took multiple. Uh, what is the word?
Are we talking about
Uh,
monkeys right now?
yeah, we're
yeah,
talking about multiple simulations of the entire span of the universe, and they got like one line of Hamlet. Do you want to see how long it takes? Do you want to see
uh,
it?
Yo,
Are you
one
gonna
second,
go get
guys,
monkeys
guys,
and
guys.
show us?
Hey
No, no,
yo,
no.
hey yo, hey yo.
They did a
Hey, 1 second,
statistical
Farid, 1 second.
analysis of
Hey,
this.
hey, hey. 1 second. I found a pattern in the 2000 numbers. Look, look on the side. Somebody comes to my room.
on the site, what?
Okay, I'm back. 1 second. Go on the, like, I'm sending a screenshot. 1 second of the numbers. 1 second.
What you are referring to is called the infinite monkey theorem.
I understand. I know what it is. Okay, I know what it is, and I understand that it'd be
Yeah,
very, very difficult for these things. But I'm just giving a very
let's check
extreme
it out.
example of
Let's check
them
it out.
writing Shakespeare, right?
No, no, they did an actual. First of all, the monkeys themselves, they did it. They just start throwing feces at each other, so that would never get anywhere. So
Uh-huh.
the monkeys themselves will never do it. That's the
So
monkeys.
you're
But
taking
let's
this
just
very,
say
very literally. Like, this
no,
is
no, no, no. But
this is me saying that in any large data set, like monkeys slapping a fucking typewriter for hours and hours and hours, and years and
hey,
years and years.
easy on the language, bro. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
a kind of a family oriented
So
server.
in the same way that they would have such a huge, large amount of numbers that you'd eventually have something, right? Um, you might, you would in a pattern in 4 million numbers, you might find a pattern, right? Especially whenever you're restricted to a certain thing, right? And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's equal to monkeys typing forever. Okay. Uh, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just a horrible analogy,
Sure. It could be a horrible analogy. I understand. Like, but I feel like you're taking it very
and
literally.
it just doesn't. I'm just curious. So, do you know they tested this, right? Like not with actual monkeys, like with actual.
I know
Um,
they would have done. I know. I think I've heard about it. Yeah. I. But if you can't accept that, if I gave you like a data set of 5 million, and you couldn't find a convincing pattern in it, like I don't know what to tell you. Like I don't think there's anything I can tell you that would like take you
no,
off of your
show
position
me.
because that's kind
Instead
of
of you don't need to
ridiculous.
tell me. You have to show me.
Uh, I mean, I don't know. I'll try to. Some guy said he found a pattern in 2000. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I have a cousin that's in coding. He might be interested in a project like this. I'll let him know about it.
Okay, so let's test your theory. Check this out. This is actually so they took the infinite number theorem, whatever, and they tested it. Let's see what we got with this. Uh, here's what we got. Let's get the results. So they actually had a million monkeys going infinitely. So check this out. Oh, you want to know something interesting? Guys, look at this. Xylura, look at this. Look at this. You guys ready? Prepare for the shock. I didn't write this. Look what it says. Moving on from there to the digital space, a program simulating. I'm putting this in VC1 chat. Are you aware? You know where to check, look,
Mm.
follow along. A program simulating such a random monkey, such a random monkey, this time who could not poop and pee on the computer, was successfully able to create the first 19 letters of the two gentlemen of Verona, Valentine, ceased to, dot, dot, dot. It only took 42 trillion, billion monkey years for the virtual monkey to do it. This was for writing 19 letters Interesting that it's 19, huh? It's not interesting. I feel like that's a sign uh, for
So what
Cam.
the monkey thing was just saying that in the same way that if you gave monkeys an infinite amount of time, right, they do have a pattern of having something like a writing
Yeah,
the
so we
same
just
19 letters.
right.
But
So what the problem is we don't have an infinite amount of time. We had one time.
I know, but I'm
We have
telling you
one
that
chance.
whenever you have large data sets, you have weird patterns. Okay,
You don't. No, you don't. This is your
are you
theory.